I'm Damien Fowler.
And I'm Eileen Sliffring.
And welcome to this edition of The Current Podcast.
This week, we're delighted to talk with Michael Irenski, the Vice President of Programmatic Revenue at Hearst Newspapers.
Now, Hearst has a legacy that goes all the way back to 1887, when William Randolph Hearst acquired the San Francisco Daily Examiner and founded the Hearst Corporation.
Only 137 years later, the legacy of the brand continues as the publisher of 24 dailies and 52 weeklies, including papers such as the Houston Chronicle and the San Francisco Chronicle.
Hearst Newspapers has a unique insight into journalism in the US at a local and a national level, even as publishers are under pressure to find fresh ways to fund their newsrooms.
We talk with Mike about the value of local journalism and what advertisers need to know about it.
Hearst Newspapers is actually a 137-year-old brand. We've been around during the same amount of time as some of our friends down the block or a couple avenues away. But I think what's really differentiated us is that over the years, we have thousands of employees, we have award-winning content, and what's made us really unique is just our strong local presence. When people think of 100-year-old companies, you just kind of think of things being stale. And I think it's a little bit different here at Hearst Newspapers is that we've always constantly been evolving, and we take pride in our core product. But I think what is particularly unique is that we have been actively engaging in our local communities over the past dozens of years and have really listened to our audiences. So some of the things that come to light for us is that we are continuing to lean into making sure that we're providing that core product of quality journalism, but we are also listening to see what is the local community looking for? What can we provide that they can't get anywhere else? And we've been recently, as of this year, expanding into puzzles and gaming. We have a big comics presence and own several large IPs. And we've also been rethinking about the types of long-form content that we do and features. So it's been an evolution over time, but I think what we've really just continued to lean into is local community aspect. And we've seen the returns as a result.
Well, I had no idea that Hearst is in the IP game so much as it is.
Oh my gosh. It's very funny. When I first started here, the other side of the floor has Popeye paraphernalia throughout the office, and I just thought people are really into Popeye. I didn't know that it was anything that we own the IP of, but it is one of many. So it's fascinating and a growing part of our business.
Oh, so interesting. Now, with so many local publications, how does that affect Hearst Newspapers' approach to something like audience segmentation?
Oh my gosh. It's very funny because each market is completely different. Albany is very different from San Francisco, which is very different from Houston. With each market, I think we still lean into providing readers that relevant, accurate information that is happening regardless of where they are. But something we like to say internally is the national stories are conversations that are being had with everyone, but the local stories are conversations with your friends or your neighbor or your family. And as a result, I think that gives us some level of differentiation. I also joke around that we cover high school sports as if it's the NBA Finals. And while we might not say focus on the Royals, this came up recently, where I was curious in our newsrooms, are we talking about the Royals? Are we providing any content? And the newsrooms have been, if the local community isn't really asking for it, that it really isn't, we'll cover it, but it's not just something that we lean into. And I think what I'm very proud of is we stay close to the zeitgeist, but we never follow the zeitgeist. We are really leaning into what our local communities want. And with those boots on the ground doing it, we have just amazing journalists and video content creators who are talking to the people. And as a result, I think it comes out in a lot of our content.
It's very much community first. which I'm sure helps when it comes to advertising as well.
It's fascinating to see how not only our readers react to our content, but also how they react to the adjacent advertising associated to it. And with that is something that we're constantly up-leveling at the national level and talking to the big brands and agencies on. But just seeing that performance at the local level is a microcosm of the things we could do. But it's very inspiring when you're able to drive business to a small entrepreneur or local business.
Mike, I feel really inspired by local newspapers. I mean, I grew up in Britain and I remember getting the Yorkshire Evening Press. It used to be an evening paper, and that's how I got interested in journalism. Just looking at all that local news, people are interested in what's happening in their backyard. And at the same time, of course, you get the national stories and international stories in there too, as well as the TV listings that I was interested in. Anyway, I digress, but that value of local journalism has been, of late, under threat. It's been challenged, and local papers we've reported on have basically been closing newsrooms and the like across the United States and indeed other countries. But do you think about that in a world where people want local journalism and how advertisers need those local audiences to advertise too? What's the inherent sort of like challenge, and how do you think about that?
Yes, I think about it often. I also think about coming here it's very hard. I don't mean to talk myself up or what we do here, but it's a very hard conversation that's being had in our industry, because I think you touched upon it perfectly. There's a lot of threat, and I think one of the things that makes us unique is that we do, across all of our properties and just Hearst brands, we have the reach. The reach play is not the challenge for us, but it's the ongoing challenge that we have with advertisers who are looking not to run on news. And it's very funny because people see the value of news, but then you'll talk to an advertiser, and I've had advertisers say this to my face that, hey, we don't run on news. I'm sorry. We would love to run, but we can't. Something I think about as a case in point is the recent eclipse that passed over the United States. We saw phenomenal traffic from our eclipse content. Think of the eclipse. The first thing I did was I went to my local sites to see what time does it start here in New York? Where can I be? Where can I watch it? You can't get that everywhere. And those are the experiences that we are constantly trying to bring to advertisers, is that there's a perception with news that it is not brand safe, that you do not want the right alignment with breaking news content. But the large majority of our content is informative and objective and educational. And wouldn't you want to be there? So I think those are where we are trying to actively challenge our advertisers. As much as we're trying to tell them to come spend with us, we're also trying to challenge them to think a little bit differently. Because I think if we can get past that, I think we're actually going to be funding the open internet, but also quality journalism again. And I'm hoping the industry will get there.
That's interesting. Do you think that advertisers' minds are being changed a little bit, or is it that there are new tools to offer more nuance in terms of what they can advertise against?
I think that it's actually changing. We're making some really great strides with some really large advertisers. With the rise of the, I'll call them fourth-party brand verifiers, there was a hammer approach to avoid brand safety. And now with the loss of the third-party cookie, people have been talking to us a lot more about, one, how do we create addressability for them and their campaigns, but how do we get smarter about our contextual targeting? And I think what we're trying to do in partnership with our advertisers is show them that an article about, again, our high school sports team shooting that basket that won the game is very different from a gun shooting or some type of gun violence. So those are the parts that we're hoping we can get advertisers to lean into and build with us. But until some of the technology is there, it's going to be really a very manual, open dialogue that we're having with them. But I think it's changing. I think especially with the cookie deprecating, this is my personal feeling, is that it's going to really spring back to the content, to the quality, and to the objectiveness of that content that's going to bring advertisers back to us.
You mentioned at the top the importance of content variety, and you mentioned long form journalism, and that's another form that's been disappearing unless it's in national magazines. Why is that important, and why is a variety of content an important factor for a newspaper publisher? when it comes to finding advertisers to embrace that content and be next to it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what we've seen is the long form content, especially as it relates to the weekends, people really are looking to understand what's happening at the local level, but they're looking for just, I think, more than just the 2 or 3 paragraphs about what's happening. They're eager to find out what's. I think of the political season, everything that's coming up, is we've been doing some really great coverage on that front, and I think we're trying to help inform people, and we're doing it in long form content, we're doing it in short form content, but we really want to give the optionality for people to sit with something, understand it, digest it, educate them. But going to the variety of content, something we, I think, do really well is we cover a little bit of everything. So we have an amazing coverage of the arts and theater and film and local community plays. But the other thing that we do really well too is, there's a new restaurant opening or a new entrepreneur or a new chef that is tearing up San Francisco, or there's a new parade in San Francisco, and that breadth of a full spectrum of what is happening at home. And I think that's what's really important for us, is to just show you can cover the breaking news all day. You can maybe get the hits from search, and maybe everyone's curious about something that advertisers might not want to run against. But the majority of what people are coming to read us on is, what happened yesterday and what should I be doing this weekend? And I think those are things that we can answer for them.
Yeah.
Totally. And outside of specific content, there's been a number of major publications, including the New York Times, that have leaned into the subscription model, especially as they realize cookies will be going away. We need to make sure our revenue model is still intact. We need people reading the news. Should this be free? We are providing a service. There's a whole list of reasons why a subscription model has been implemented. And part of that is enlarging also your footprint through podcasts and other apps. But as we've all seen, not everybody has that kind of scale to do that. What role should advertising play then versus that subscription model?
Yes, great question. I'm a proponent of advertising helps fund the open internet. I will always champion that. And I also say that we have a phenomenal customer engagement, consumer marketing team that is driving an amazing subscription business. But looking at the evolution of subscriptions, I think especially in a economic market there's a lot of choice now, and especially with things like streaming, I think there's a lot more penny pinching that is happening. In a past life, I've really analyzed, are people willing to have multiple newspaper subscriptions, or are they really just leaning into one and just have that brand loyalty? And something that we've been really taking a hard look at is, one, who's subscribing to our publications, but where are they? Is it in DMA? Is it out of DMA? So we're catering to that subscription audience, but at the same time, we know there are going to be people that aren't going to subscribe. Maybe they don't have the budget to subscribe, and we still want to provide them that same level of quality content and news and informative news. So we've been a little bit different in that we have 2 types of publication formats. We have a free model and a paid model. Our paid is exactly what it sounds like. It has a lot more of that long form, behind a paywall, investigative journalism, some of that content. But there's a different type of content that we're sharing that is allowing people to still stay informed and still be engaged in their local community. And what we're hoping is that it will have this flywheel effect where when people see the type of content that we're putting out there, and that's how we've been thinking about it. And we have a lot of investment on our free model.
On that note, you mentioned this before, that you guys have implemented more games, and you're not the only ones looking to gain or find more ways to really gain more first-party data, especially as cookies deprecate. Are there any other strategies that Hearst is, looking into to create and build that free content model?
Yes, there is. We have a robust first-party data set. It's very important to us. I just want to plug that everything we do it with the extreme quality of being privacy compliant. And we really value the first party data that we have. But with that being said, to your point, we've been really thinking of different types of experiences that we can unlock for our users. As we mentioned, we have a new site called Puzzmo that if anyone ever wants to play Spell Tower, I highly recommend it. It's an extremely fun game. But what's really great about the Puzzmo side is there's an interactive community aspect to it. You can play games with your friends. You can time yourself. There's a bit more of a social activation to it that we've been really having a lot of fun with. And we're seeing the returns back on the audience side as well. And we have other partnerships that are currently in the works as well that are going to help bring different forms of content like that to better just help people understand what they're doing with probably a little bit of free time that they have. We just want to help them relax a little bit more.
Nice.
I like that, yeah. We've already mentioned cookie deprecation several times in this conversation. Just wanted to zero in on how you think about that identity conundrum that publishers are facing right now. What are the sort of solves for it that you're thinking about?
Yes. So we've been very leaned into the identity, call it ecosystem, and identity resolution. We are pretty lucky with that first-party data that we do have. Being a 137-year-old brand, loyal readers, we've been collecting this for quite some time. I think we've also been ready for the cookie to deprecate for quite some time. It's been a challenge when things keep getting pushed back.
I know I'm ready.
But what we've been really leaning into is making sure that we understand how do we still provide relevant advertising in a cookieless world. And as a result, we've been leaning into the deterministic side of the house. We have millions of email addresses and that people have consented to give us. We're being very smart about it. We are creating new newsletter opportunities. It's very funny. I think back on newsletters when I first got into this industry, and it was just static creatives that you see when you are looking for some news. But we've been really thinking outside the box of how do we utilize these premium audiences more? How do we lean into a newsletter strategy that isn't just, hey, this is what happened or this is what's on the site? So we're building our overall subscription base on the newsletter side. And then I would share that we're working really hard on the contextual end as well.
So, Mike, you're actually a great source to talk about DMAs. Where would you say are your largest markets, and how do you incentivize readers out of those DMAs?
Yes, I think about DMAs all the time. I will say that. While we provide that national reach, I would say our largest DMAs are typically Houston, San Francisco, Albany. I would say all of Connecticut, just the entire state of Connecticut. We have a slam dunk in coverage. But I think what's really interesting, I'll use San Francisco Chronicle as a great example of, and I didn't know this until I really started here, which is people who are reading the San Francisco Chronicle, they're obviously reading it in San Francisco, but a lot of people travel to LA or work in Palo Alto or are traveling all throughout California and are actively reading the Chronicle. And then I have a bunch of friends who've told me this, who are ex-San Franciscans who now live in New York, who are San Francisco Chronicle subscribers. And what we've been really trying to track is understanding people who have brand loyalty, who want to know what's happening in their community, but maybe aren't there anymore. So we've been looking to see where that overlap of where are some of our largest DMAs that are differing from our boots on the ground market coverage. And you'll see a lot of people in New York reading San Francisco Chronicle or SF Gate. And as a result, it's made us rethink a little bit of how do we engage with those audiences. It's a fun challenge because it's people you really want to keep informed. You want to, let them know what's happening back home. Maybe they're going to come back home for a holiday. Maybe they're going to come back home long term. But we want to be there letting them know everything that's happening. So it's been a very fun project of mine, which is just slicing and dicing the different parts of America to see where our second, third, fourth largest DMAs as it relates to our core key markets, and how do we come up with a different strategy? I think going back to even the whole free, paid, what we're doing with cookies of it all is we've actively are looking into the DMA aspect as well to see, maybe paying for a subscription for the San Francisco Chronicle is tough when you're in New York and you're living a busy life, in which case maybe we do something a little bit different for them. Maybe we provide them different incentives to come back to us. So that's been something I've been working on actively on the back end, which has been a lot of fun.
Do you see a big surge during an election year?
Coincidentally, this year has been, we do. This year's been a little different. I don't know if it's here in America, at least at a national level, people either have already decided or we have two candidates that people know about already. It's been a softer year than we've expected, but our ongoing theory and our conversation with many of our political advertisers is that it's probably going to all fit into the back half of the year. We've had a lot of RFPs and budgets shift later and later and later. So I actually think there's going to most likely be a surge, come Q3, Q4.
That makes sense, given the fact that there wasn't so much hoopla around primary season. There was no real need for a primary this year, right, on either side.
Exactly. It's very interesting, too, because I think it's thrown some of the political agencies and trading desks for a loop a little bit. There are certain people that we can rely on and we actively are talking to, and even they're like, hey, I got the money, but we're doing it later. And when it comes to budgeting, we budgeted that it would be a little bit more of a stronger year, but I think we're hoping that over time, people are going to pick it back up.
Yeah, not to resort back to the doom and gloom, and bring up a certain company again. But so Google recently threatened to remove links and pause investments for California publishers in response to the pending California Journalism Preservation Act, also known as CJPA, due to them having to basically pay a fee to link Californians to news articles. Is this concerning to Hearst, having, of course, properties in California? And if so, why?
Well, I'll say local news is always under pressure, just over even ongoing state law as it relates to privacy. I think these are just things that are going to continue to happen. And, we have to remain steadfast in our position of what we do and informing people and communities as business as usual. But it's something that we are very close to. And, we are continue to work with a lot of our largest partners and the walled gardens to ensure that, we're still able to deliver on our mission statement. But it's something that it's another day and another challenge. And I firmly believe we're going to get through it.
So, Mike, how would you say news blockers are basically an impediment to advertisers?
I would say it's really from these fourth parties. I think it's the way we're getting tagged, even at a keyword level. We find a lot of our advertisers, if they're not running against an allow list, block list on the domain level, which we've had to unblock. We've had people spend with us and want to do a buy with us, and then we later find out that we were on a block list for news. But I think the difficult part as it relates to brand safety is someone will not want to run against any type of Donald Trump content or Trump. And that will get tagged as not brand safe as relates to their advertising buy. But in actuality, the content itself is brand safe. If we said, hey, Trump is the front runner for the candidate, that content is deemed not brand safe. And all we're doing is informing people of the news that he is the front runner to being the candidate. So I think that's where the challenges have lied. It's less on kind of any type, like I said, we remove ads on certain types of content that we don't think advertisers would run on. But the challenge has been how an article about Trump being the new candidate versus Trump going to court or doing something, that it might be a little bit more sensational are completely different types of content. And I think we lean more into the facts and the objective nature of our coverage. But to advertisers, both of those are equal. And we just need to figure out a better way to inform them of those types of of things. I'll use shot as a good example, where shot shows up often on a keyword block list, and we will talk about basketball shots and people shooting 3-pointers to win games, and that content will be tagged unbrand safe when it's probably the most brand safe community-based content that you're going to get. So those are the challenges that we're actively engaging with people on, is just informing them more contextual relevancy and less on individual keywords in isolation.
And that's it for this edition of The Current Podcast. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned.
The Current Podcast's theme is by Love and Caliber. The Current team includes Kat Fessy and Sydney Cairns.
And remember,
the national stories are conversations that are being had with everyone, but the local stories are conversations with your friends or your neighbor or your family.
I'm Damien.
And I'm Elise.
And we'll see you next time. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a review. Also, tune into our other podcast, The Current Report, a weekly roundup of what's happening in the world of digital media.